But today's kitchen formuloni, nope, kitchen ravioli, give me the. Today we're gonna be talking about putting. Oh, I made the most. That's, oh my gosh. Okay, so we're gonna break this video up into two parts, kind of. But before that, I'm gonna go over some fundamentals that should be true all the time when putting. And when the idea of putting and being good at putting is obviously consistency and confidence. So when we're talking about how we want to putt, how we should putt, we should be doing something to get the disc from our hand into the basket confidently and repeatedly. And also we want to get the disc into the basket at a pace that we desire. So what I would recommend for everyone is that as you're kind of like developing your stroke for your putting, meaning the way that you like to putt the disc, however that may be, that we start from a pretty close distance, like 5 feet, just because we don't want to have to worry about making and missing. This is purely just to develop feeling of what we like to do. Now, we can talk about feeling. And this is where we're going to split the video up into two parts. The first type of putting that we're going to talk about is pulling. Now, I know you've probably heard about spin putting and push putting and spush putting, or regardless, I believe that there's two main ways that we putt. And that is, one is like a push, and the other one is like a pull. I'm not going to say push and spin because I think all putts spin to some degree. You know, you either get a lot of spin or you get like a little bit of spin or like a lot of wobble and spin. Regardless, one motion is more of a pushing motion and one motion is more of a pulling motion. And I'm going to talk about the pulling motion because that's how I like to putt. So if you like the idea of pulling, you like the idea of putting is no nonsense. We want it kind of similar to how we already touch the disc most of the time when we're throwing. And if you're a constant consumer here at Bogey Broth, you know that when we throw the disc here, it's always a pulling motion, a lat pulling motion, and then using weight shift to pull even harder. And the same can be true with putting. So when we're first talking about the motion of the putt and the release of the putt, we're talking about how we're gripping the putt. And I'm not going to get into like specific finger and hand place it. I'm talking about an idea. The idea of how I like to putt is I'm gripping my disc in a way with anticipation of pulling my arm. Now when I'm pulling is a backwards motion. Pulling is a into the body motion, right? So it gets kind of counterpointed if you think about pulling out towards the basket. But we can accomplish that by placing our hand in a way where we put our wrist and maybe part of our arm between the disc and the basket. So that way we can pull through, you know, the elbow. We can pull our arm towards the basket. You guys can see the basket is here. Here's my disc. And I'm putting my hand between the basket and my putter. So technically, from that position, I'm pulling the disc. And the thing is, this feeling is very similar to the feeling of just throwing the disc. The key point to this method is that as we are trying to pull with more power, and since we're pulling forward, which is kind of I can't, you know what I'm saying? It's weird, the idea of pulling forward. So we need to make sure that we're staying true to that motion through the whole throw. And as I putt from further and further distances, I need to make sure that I'm not trying to like snap my wrist open or, you know, move my arm in a different way. It's like the throw where we're keeping loose and we're pulling one motion and letting our body naturally follow through. So from a short distance, that looks like this. But from a longer distance, it looks like this. And that's what I'm saying. When we want to get those longer distance putts, we need to be careful that we're not pulling and then kind of like flaring our hand out at the end to get that extra spin, the extra pop. We don't need that if we're pulling. If we're pulling the disc, we're pulling from the outside edge, because that's where your hand is, and that will generate plenty of spin, plenty of power. You can see even from very far distances, I'm gonna try to hit this wall like middle, like chest height, like as if there was a basket over there. And watch how much effort I put into this motion. You see I got a lot. I just kind of tossed the disc over there. The idea of the pull, and the reason why I like it, is because it's very simple and it's very similar to throwing the disc how we throw it already. And the final thing I'll say about the pulling is the stance. I think you can stand however you want basically for any type of putting. It's about what helps you feel oriented to the basket. I like to stagger because I like the idea of, since I'm pulling, I like my legs to be kind of similar to as if I was throwing. And that means that when I go to pull forward, I'm not necessarily pushing off my back leg onto my front leg, because that's not how we throw. When we throw, we're just weight shifting, right? And that's very similar to how I'll do it when I putt. I'm on my back leg, and as I go to pull my arm forward, I'm just shifting my weight onto my front leg. And that can give you a little extra power. You could also do like a straddle. I'll say that would be a little bit harder with this type of pulling. If you wanted this straddle putt and you wanted to pull, one, you got to make sure that you're really getting your shoulders oriented to your basket, because this pulling is kind of more of a right release. So it'd be more like this. If I was thinking about like Paul Macbeth, how he kind of straddles putts, he kind of stands like this, right? And he's pulling that way. The idea is just play around with it though. Stand 5 feet away from your basket, or even just stand at a wall. It is good to have a target to make sure that you're consistent on where it's going. But we want to stand at a distance. We're not worried about making or missing. We're just developing feeling. And then we can back up, develop accuracy and consistency. And the biggest thing with the pulling is, as we back up, we don't want to add any extra flair. Just how when we're throwing harder, we're not trying to spin with our shoulders. We're not trying to push with our legs. The form's always the same. It's always smooth, pulling, weight shifting. And that's the same way that you can putt.
Welcome. I'm here to explain the other type of putting, which is the push putt. Basically, so the push putt being different from the pull putt that Joe talked about is really like how I kind of think about it, and how I help myself, like, I guess, kind of lock into the feeling of it, is almost like I'm lofting the disc up into the air and having it travel up and then kind of back down into the basket. But you can also, like, instead of having a lofty putt, you can also have a more direct putt, like right at the chains, to like right where your hand releases. So like you can kind of think of it like in more regular terms of like something that's more similar that you've probably done before, would be tossing a cornhole bag. So kind of how you're lofting your hand up to the point of release and then allowing it to, stay in the air and then finally fall to its destination. And you can also achieve that same thing more directly, like say if you're trying to hit someone's bag immediately, you're not going to want to try to land it on top of them, but you're going to want to try to throw it directly at it to like skip it off. So yeah, so here's like a difference. So like for shorter putts, I can kind of do that sort of direct, right at my target kind of movement. But then if I want to do a longer putt, I'm going to need to, I can try to be more direct at it, but the farther I go, that kind of starts turning into a pull putt, or like spin putt, if you may. So if I still want to do the same kind of putt, I want to be in the air. Okay, I'm consistency. The reason I missed that first putt was because I'm not following through, and I think that's a very important part of any kind of putting, is you want to make sure that you are following through to your target and not cutting it short, because that can your release point can be lower than it should be, or you can cause yourself to release early and come out left. Or the main issue like you might run into is like, so the wrist, like how does the wrist move? And honestly, it's a very fluid motion, especially I feel like with push putting, because your wrist sort of in a way kind of stays like locked, I guess, like if you kind of think about it, like, but it's not completely locked, because this would be completely locked, like your wrist does have fluidity, but you kind of like bring your wrist in and then allow like the motion of your arm extending forward, and you kind of keep that wrist, like, keep that grip tight around the putter, but then allow your wrist to just move like naturally. Like, don't try to force it open, and don't try to keep it like tightly closed either. The way that I grip this is kind of like if I'm tossing this to someone, like if I'm tossing a bottle of Coke to someone, or like a can, or like a ball. Like I'm tossing a ball to someone is kind of how
You
I would
support
describe
it underneath of it.
Yeah. So like my main focus is my fingers underneath of the disc, and then allowing that my hand is just open at the basket. All right, so when it comes to power, how I like to get more power with my type of putt is, instead of really like weight shifting between my feet, I kind of focus on keeping my weight on this front foot. I guess it just kind of helps me, like I kind of like squat down on this leg and kind of push up into it. I really think like for push putting, you definitely probably don't want to have like a whole lot of movement, because I kind of feel like how I'm putting kind of just comes from the arm basically, and using like your whole arm as a lever to push the disc forward. So it kind of starts like from my shoulder, and I bring it down. I feel like it really comes down to like how low you want to drop it. So like if I really want to get farther, I tend to drop my putter in between my legs so that I can give it the amount of height, because just going from here to here, you have power, but you can definitely get more power coming from lower to higher if you're really trying to, hit that long distance putt. But yeah, but you just want to make sure that you continue to stay like fluid with it, and keep your arm on the same plane as towards the basket. Yeah, you don't want to like force any. You don't want to like force your hand forward like a punch. You kind of want it to be soft and like, I guess, delicate, like a I don't know, like you're sprinkling candy.
Yeah, like you're on a parade float and you're tossing candy off the side.
Like you're on a parade float and you're tossing candy. You're not gonna wail candy at people. You're gonna, kind of toss it up and let the candy spread out. So, yeah.
I think that's the main difference between pulling and pushing, spinning, spushing, whatever you want to call it. One type of putting, like me, is more of straight line. I have my disc kind of on the plane I want it, and I'm pulling my disc straight on that path. So I can put straight at the basket, or I can put up to the basket and I'm just having my disc low and pulling high, right? You can also change your angles based just how you would change your angles during a throw. And Andy, instead of being on that straight line, he's always low to high through his putt.
Yeah. But really it just comes down to preference. What you enjoy.
Yeah, you try it all out. And I mean, some people do that horseshoe toss putt.
Yeah, that's kind of a mix of both.
If you can get the disc in the basket reliably, and especially from like 30 feet, that's where you're putting majority of the time, then you're going to be fine. Whatever you develop within 30 feet is good. And then if you want to get some more power outside of 30 feet, you can try some of the stuff that we talked about. But really, get the disc in the basket. It's not that hard.
You really just got to think about what's the best way to do it.
The way that I said to do it. That was probably the best cartwheel I've ever done.
That was pretty good.
No one's a bogey broth in a really grotesque.
Oh, right. That's my phone number.